Well, good morning, everyone. Pleased to be here. Thank you to Derek and Maurice and the organisers for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm going to offer a few reflections on the topic of value added from my perspective as a researcher, as an academic. I'm going to talk about three things. A little bit about how we think about value added has changed over time, changing perspectives on value added. And then I'm going to touch on two themes. Implications for how we think about consumers and their influence in the value chain, implications for supply chains, and in both of those contexts, I want to talk a little bit about where can policy play a role and where can research play a role in informing that policy. So when I was sort of thinking a little bit about what I might touch on today, as I said, I was thinking about how we conceive of the concept of value added has changed over time. And in fact, we've talked about value added for a long time. And I went back and was digging around a little bit, and I found this report from Agriculture Canada, so before it was AAFC, Ag Canada, in 1981. Now, just to put this in perspective, last semester I was teaching a fourth-year class in agricultural marketing systems. Most of my students are going to convocate this summer, and they're going out. Most of them are going back into the ag industry. They're our future and new farmers, agribusiness executives and leaders, and so forth. So 1981 was a good 12 to 13 years before any of these students were born. Okay, this is a long time ago. I just made Doug Headley cringe, so that's my work here is done, I guess. So back in 1981, what did we say about how do we conceive value added? So this is the definition from that report. In assessing the relative size of industries, the concept of value added is useful. This is essentially the value added by the processing activity to purchase materials and supplies and reflects the degree of processing. Okay, so it was very much a sense of it's about processing, right? In a sense, a fairly mechanistic definition and a fairly narrow way of thinking about value added. So let's fast forward, 35 odd years. If you do what my students did, I set them a term paper last semester. I told them about all the great resources in our library, and of course they just go to Google. And if you Google value-added agriculture, what do you come up with? Well, I found this centre. I don't know much about the Robert M. Kerr Food and Agricultural Products Centre, but with a name like that, I thought it had to be pretty credible. So 2016, they say value-added is the process of taking a raw commodity, changing its form to produce a high-quality end product. Value added is defined as the addition of time, place, and/or form utility to a commodity in order to meet the tastes and preferences of consumers. So in other words, value added is figuring out what consumers want, when they want it, and where they want it, then make it and provide it to them. So we're talking now about consumers. Yes, we're still talking about processing at one level, but also, of course, now throwing in consumers. And every student's favourite reference when they're writing a term paper is Wikipedia. So what does Wikipedia say about value added in agriculture? It refers most generally to manufacturing processes that increase the value of primary ag commodities. Value added agriculture may also refer to increasing the economic value of a commodity through particular production processes, e.g. organic, regionally branded products that increase consumer appeal, willingness to pay a premium over similar but undifferentiated products. So, in other words, clearly our notion of value added is considerably broader than it was back in the 1980s, where, yes, we may be talking about food processing, but we're already also talking about all the other ways in which we might differentiate food products, and we're talking very much about consumers in that sense. And I was reminded of this change in the way we think about food and value added. I was back in the UK over Christmas, and there's a new supermarket that had cropped up close to where my parents live. And we, as a bit of a foodie nerd, I love to look around different, the ways in which food is marketed in different countries. And we were wandering around this supermarket, and we passed by the eggs. And I was really struck by, and I'll show you in a minute, the variety and differentiation in the eggs on the shelf in this particular supermarket. Now, why would that be of interest? Well, I grew up on a dairy farm in the UK, but my parents also had some hens, a couple hundred layers, and we would deliver eggs around the village every Thursday morning. Okay, so Thursday morning, my parents would go around the local village delivering eggs to various customers. And in my school vacations, my brother and I would help them out. So So we're back now in the sort of, late 70s, early 80s. What did the egg on my egg round look like at that time? Well, it was most eggs in the UK are brown shelled. It was a brown egg, and we would sell it in little grey boxes, pretty much like this one. So you could buy a half dozen, or maybe a tray, 2.5 dozen. And there really wasn't much differentiation here. You could buy small eggs and big ones, I guess. Now, yes, these eggs were delivered by a local farmer to the door of the consumer, by a couple of cute kids. But no one really talked much about that sort of local element or knowing the farmer at that point. They really were basic eggs. So in some senses, we can think about an egg as a classic commodity in that 1981 notion of value added. There's no processing here. From the chicken to the consumer, apart from maybe cleaning it, there really wasn't much that, there was no value added in that 1981 definition. There was not much differentiation. So let's fast forward 35 years, and I'm in this supermarket and struck by the variety of eggs that I could see. So I got back to Saskatoon, and I was thinking about what I would say today, and I went online. Most of the UK supermarkets, you can order and have your groceries delivered online now, so there's a nice example. So I went to that particular retailer and thought, well, can I find out, what range of eggs this retailer has for sale? So I'm going to share some of these pictures with you just to sort of illustrate that point. So we have, the essential is this, it was Waitrose. So Waitrose is a sort of higher-end supermarket retail chain in the UK. This is their essential half dozen free-range eggs. I'm going to throw up the prices here. You can pretty much double them right now to get to Canadian dollars. So yes, you can buy, free-range eggs, but you can buy eggs also that are marketed on the basis of the breed of the hen that laid them. Burford Browns, Burford Buffs. You may not be able to read this. This says Colombian, 6 free-range eggs from Colombian blacktail hens. Old Cotswold leg bar. These are in pastel-coloured shells. Okay, so they're like kind of light blue-green colour. Whites, and a little box of 4 eggs from a mixed breeds. Okay, who would ever thought that you would be marketing eggs based on the breed of the hen that laid the eggs? There are eggs marketed by the Happy Egg Company that are marketed on the basis of animal welfare attribute. This is an interesting one. Eggs for soldiers. So Help for Heroes is a little logo there, is a charity that helps disabled veterans in the UK Armed Forces. So a portion of the price of these eggs go to a charity. So these are eggs clearly marketed on the basis of a cause-related marketing. And regional, East Anglia's in the southeast part of the UK. Welsh eggs. I did my undergraduate degree in Wales. Big and Welsh referred to rugby players then, not eggs, so that's obviously changed. These are from the West Country, in the southwest part of the UK, Duchy organic eggs. The Duchy of Cornwall is Prince Charles's, owns a lot of that land. There's a little logo though, it's hard to see, but it's supporting the Prince's charities. So he has a lot of charities that work with youth. So those again are marketed both on a regional basis, but also now with sort of a charity assigned to it. And this one is Ireland, corn-fed eggs from Ireland, and again with a range of prices there. And of course, as we see here, we have eggs marketed with health attributes. Omega-3, another brand of omega-3. Boost the Roost, these are eggs that are marketed on the basis of enhanced levels of selenium. Now, eggs are a natural source of selenium, but these are from hens fed a diet rich in selenium. So eggs with health attributes. Or eggs from ducks, eggs from quails. And finally, oh no, not quite finally, this one had me very curious, baking eggs. I thought, well, can't you bake with any egg? What's a baking egg? So I was quite curious. I went to the website of the company, Ella Valentine, that brands this eggs. This is how they describe their baking eggs. I'll let you read that. So I guess they're big eggs in a pink carton, marketed at women. I'm not so sure about that one. I don't know. And finally, if cracking an egg is too much work, you can buy whole eggs. These are 15 whole eggs in a carton. Or if cracking an egg and separating it's too much work, you can buy egg whites in a carton. Or if cracking an egg and adding cheese, you can buy an omelette mix. Okay. Or if you don't have time to hard-boil your eggs, you can buy your eggs ready hard-boiled. And if you don't have time to peel those eggs, you can buy them hard-boiled and peeled. Okay, so clearly the way we think about value added from what, this is a long way from my egg round is the point, right? So the way we think about value added in the food industry has changed enormously in that intervening period. And yes, it may involve processing, so these are good examples, but it also involves many, many other attributes that we can think about that differentiate eggs. So clearly, when we think about value added, consumers really matter in this picture. Consumers are increasingly interested in where the food comes from, how it's produced, what makes it different. So many value-added diversification opportunities exist, not just in terms of further processing, but in terms of signaling some of these attributes, as we've seen from those examples, might be health, nutrition, how the food was produced in terms of its environmental footprint, that the charity notion was an interesting one, or just notions of authenticity, as we've heard, has become a sort of a buzzword or a keyword in the food industry, origin, and so on and so forth. So, and these are issues that as researchers, there's a growing body of literature that's trying to tease apart some of these issues. It's difficult in one slide to capture some of all of those messages, but if I was to pull out some key messages from some of the research I'm aware of, and some of this came out of the former Consumer Demand Network, the IRCA network, we learned things like credible quality verification is really important. It matters a lot. To some consumers. Okay, so consumers differ in the extent to which they're going to respond to different quality verification signals from different people. There seemed to be, in some of the research in a Canadian context, is there a potential public sector role in facilitating those credible verifications, in facilitating trust? Certainly, we also see the potential and the concern for overlapping quality cues in these food markets, so different quality signals coming from different parties. Is this creating too much noise for consumers? So certainly that's been raised as an issue. And a growing body of work looking at the notion of trust and how we understand trust. A PhD student, Rim Lasud, who worked with me, finished up about a year and a half ago, was looking at this notion in the context of firm-level brand trust versus food system trust. And I think it's quite important to recognize those are different notions of trust, and how we think about them and how they interact together is pretty important. We also know from the growing body of research that how consumers respond to new food technologies can be quite complex and quite nuanced. And I think the overarching message coming from some of that work is that consumers are highly heterogeneous. It's important to avoid generalizations. We need to think about that consumer heterogeneity and what it means for the food industry and what it means for policy. So where can policy play a role in this regard? Perhaps, let's throw this out, in facilitating somehow these credible quality assurances. Is there perhaps a role for a USDA-style process verification type program? We certainly see a rapidly evolving health food sector. Some of those egg products we were looking at, of course, are making health claims or implied health claims. So there's an important policy question here about how do you strike the appropriate regulatory balance, between protecting consumers and indeed the industry from misleading claims, either health claims or other quality claims, and providing an environment that stimulates innovation, the possibility to product differentiate. So that regulatory piece is important, both in terms of health claims, but more generally. And of course, knowing when to step back. What's the appropriate balance of public and private sector here in this picture around quality assurances and consumer trust? And what about research? How can research inform these policy questions? Well, I think we need a much more nuanced understanding of consumer perceptions and attitudes, and in particular, how that translates into behaviour, into consumer decisions, what they actually do when they get to the retail store. And in that regard, I think I'm very optimistic. There's lots of valuable insights being gained from the behavioural and experimental economics. We're seeing a growing interest in applying those techniques to agriculture and to food purchase decisions. We've had speakers in the past, I think, at this conference that have talked about that. Just as a quick plug, in my other role, I'm one of the co-editors of the Canadian Journal of Agricultural Economics, and we've got a special issue coming out later this year that will feature some research that uses behavioural experimental economics to look at agriculture, food and resource decisions. So there's lots of, I think, quite innovative work in that field. And just for example, that helps us challenge some of our traditional assumptions in our economic models about how consumers make decisions. Right? This calculative, rational consumer decision-making versus a more intuitive decision-making model where heuristics play a role. So thinking about how consumers make those decisions, the role of social networks, social media and consumer decision-making, I think are all ways in which research can help inform some of this policy dialogue in terms of unpacking consumer decision-making, understanding trust and how food system trust and brand trust link and so forth. And also, to the second issue I'm going to touch on very briefly is that supply chain relationships in this whole picture clearly matter, and they matter a lot. And we heard some of that from Joanne's presentation earlier. And that's true, I think, very much in a commodity supply chain context and in a differentiated value chain context. And I deliberately use the word "and" rather than versus. I think too often we put these things opposite one another and say we can't do both, or we need to. And clearly there's a role, there should be a role for where we're most efficient in a commodity supply chain context, but also a role in the differentiated value chain space. So capturing those value-added opportunities in both of these types of supply chains and value chains requires, as we heard from Joanne, in fact, closer coordination and collaboration across the supply chain. And we're seeing some interesting examples from canola and pulses, as we heard, that I think can be maybe valuable lessons for other sectors where collaboration and coordination, those conversations have been a little harder to achieve. It also, I think, means that information becomes increasingly important, and the way in which that information flows through the supply chain. It might be information on product quality, grades, variety, or product specs, information on production methods, and so on and so forth. So in terms of where can policy play a role in this space, I think getting that institutional environment right and making sure that institutional environment evolves as necessary to support the changing nature of supply chains is important. So that might involve information on quality signals, grading system, certification, R&D or innovation. So as we heard, as Joanne touched on as well, how we fund and how we think about how we organize innovation and R&D across the sector. Perhaps also facilitating collaboration both across and within sectors, from, for example, the sustainability roundtables, as we already touched on, or a role in enhancing information flows. And finally, just back to some of the things we heard yesterday in terms of international trade, an important role, I think, is ensuring access to international markets for the Canadian ag sector and supply chain, sort of being at the table to influence the rules of the game. So be that, deciding which regional trade agreements to pursue as a priority. Where can research play a role? I think an important question to me is to understand how broad food system goals connect with industry-level goals and connect with firm-level decisions. Because at the end of the day, it's firms that innovate, it's firms that make decisions about which markets to enter, it's firms which make product differentiation decisions. So I think it's important that we can unpack those drivers of decision-making at the firm level and understand how firms make adoption decisions and so forth. Excuse me. And think also about how the institutional environment affects incentive for firms to diversify and so forth. This is my last slide, thankfully. So 3 take-home messages. Value added has multiple dimensions. Consumers are highly heterogeneous. So understanding consumers' decision-making and behavior, I think, is a priority. And those supply chain relationships really matter. Excuse me. So I think we need to think about, how we bridge that gap between broad food system goals and firm-level decisions. Thank you.